There are forces of good and forces of evil at work in the world today. What are these forces? Who is responsible for the good? And who is responsible for the evil? Richard Schaff talks about current events which are rarely discussed by the mainstream media, events that affect us all. This program seeks to identify, to inform, and to equip the believer for what's ahead. Welcome to What in the World is Going On?
Good listeners, this is What in the World is Going On. I'm your host, Richard Schaff. The program is sponsored by Lincoln Log Homes. We are pro-Christian, pro-American, pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, and here by the grace of God. I had something come across my desk from a missionary friend of mine. He's a missionary to the nation of Israel, a Messianic Jew himself. The older I get, the more I'm reminded of the things that this world will soon fade away. They're here today and they're gone tomorrow. But as a citizen of heaven through faith in Christ, I rejoice in God's promise of an eternal inheritance that's incorruptible. It'll never decay. It's undefiled, it's pure, and it'll never fade away. It's eternal. That's from 1 Peter, first chapter, verses 3 through 5. As a child of the King, this same inheritance is held and reserved for you, folks. I pray you too are rejoicing in that wondrous reality, especially as you witness the rise of wickedness and chaos in our nation. America continues to move away from its Judeo-Christian foundations. Strong and strange winds are blowing, and powerful storms are going to descend. Only those whose roots are sunk deeply into God's Word will be able to stand. You see, big business can't fix our problems. Secular universities don't have the answers. The media is corrupt, and the Hollywood is anti-God. Government can't solve the crisis we face either. Sadly, few of our elected officials are marching in the cadence of our God. Most are marching to a much different drummer. Heaven is our eternal home, but for now, you and I are going to have to reside in this crazed and confused planet. How then should we live? What should permeate our thinking? Where should we invest our time and resources? Well, a familiar little rhyme reminds us of the clear and simple answer. Only one life will soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. I want to follow that by hoping that many of you watched the reporting on the Dallas police officer that was fired and found guilty of murder, a white female officer. I don't know the particulars of the case. I don't have the details on that at all. But what I want to talk about is the witness that was given on that. This lady was convicted of murder. At her sentencing trial last Friday, a young chap came up, 18 years old, black. He happened to be the brother of the man that was shot and killed. During the trial, the mother and father and all of the family members were out. They had talked about, they'd shown the grief, some animosity. They had racial overtones. But this young chap came up and he said, I hoped I never would be doing this in front of my family. But he expressed his forgiveness of that police officer. He said that he loved her as a person. Wow. He expressed his wishes for her well-being and hoped that Christ would be a factor in her life. Folks, it was the most impressive Christian witness of love and forgiveness and caring that I've ever seen. Toward the end, he asked the judge, if he could go down and hug this young lady. The judge, after a hesitation, said yes. They hugged. They embraced. I've never seen such forgiveness. I never recall seeing anything that was that strong a testimony for the love and the forgiveness of Christ. Fox News, to her credit, did a full coverage of it. There was no cutout. At the end, the black female judge gave the white convicted police officer her personal Bible. Again, folks, the most uplifting thing that I've ever seen on TV. I'm sure of it. just wanted to share it with you. Now let's get to our current events, and what's going on could only be going on in Washington. As the release of the IG's report on FISA abuse, the results of A.G. Barr's investigation, and the John Durham's report on the origins of the Russia collusion hoax are about to be made public, the Democrat Party has begun to melt down in true Wicked Witch style. They're inventing new crimes to accuse the president of. He's got a new one every week, and each new allegation is sillier than the previous one. The entire collusion with Russia charge, as most people know by now, was fabricated by Hillary Clinton and a vast group of deep state crooks who believed themselves to be above the law. So certain were they of their manipulations would ensure Hillary's victory in 2016, they happily embarked on implementing their insurance policy, certain that their game would never come to light. And they would all have had unimpeded power and job security for at least the next 8 years. Well, that grand scheme imploded. They had to devise a cover-up plan in a hurry. So Comey and his merry band of thugs plotted, set up meetings, wrote memos that were released to various people who saw it, and then made their way into the New York Times and the Washington Post. CNN and MSNBC made their hoax in the main course every night for over 2 years. There were plenty of self-important, not journalists, willing to prostrate themselves on the altar of Trump's destruction, and they offered themselves and their services to the cause. Not one of them, it seems, gave a moment's thought to the illegality, not to mention the immorality of what they were doing. They hoped at first to prevent Trump's inauguration, and failing that, have been working to see him impeached ever since. Now they're floundering, their calls for impeachment increasingly flimsy and easier to shoot down. Adam Schiff's antics surely must be embarrassing, but rather than call him out, they're all getting on board the impeachment train. What are they accomplishing? I'll tell you what. Trump's certain re-election. Pelosi, Nadler, Schiff, and all of them, they all seemed not to be aware of how thoroughly enraged millions of Americans have become as they stage their ever more ridiculous theatrical farce. Trump has gained millions of supporters due to his policy successes on the economy, jobs, deregulation, and the revival of manufacturing in the U.S., the border, and foreign policy. He's gained even more supporters now thanks to the escalating Democrat zeal to see him removed from office. So confident are the Democrats that we, Trump supporters, original and the newly acquired ones, are easily fooled that they are certain that by dragging their utterly obviously foolish plans out slowly, they can drive down Trump's approval ratings and see him impeached before the 2020 election. Their pathetic performance, complete with the usual prescribed word-for-word talking points spread throughout the media realm they control, is falling now on deaf ears. And now we've heard it all and seen it all, from Comey and McCabe, Strzok, Page, Clapper and Brennan, Rosenstein, Yates. Now on to the cat's paws and the prince in electronic media. The cult to bring down Trump has become completely bonkers, dedicated to a losing proposition that's going to blow up in their face when Trump wins in a landslide in 2020. Hillary Clinton is doing her clueless best to re-elect Trump, too. She's likely gearing to jump in the race when Biden drops out. She's showing up all over the place to demean Trump in every possible way and to demand impeachment. Won't that be great fun when we see Trump defeat her again? Won't you love it when he takes her on? That woman is the most self-unaware person on the planet. Surely she knows the truth of the collusion hoax is about to be revealed in detail. She knows she commissioned and paid for the Steele dossier. She knows all of the secrets that have never been fully brought out on Benghazi. She knows she used her foundation to sell access and become fabulously wealthy. You know, she makes Biden Hunter look like a piker. She knows that the schemers at the FBI, the DOJ, and the DNI worked to destroy Trump to guarantee her victory, and they failed. She knows all this, and still she thinks people are going to vote for her to be president. Is it possible that she's that boneheaded? Well, I think she probably is. She brings to mind a strange mixture of complete stupidity and naked ambition. George Bernard Shaw wrote, and I quote, "He knows nothing, and he thinks he knows everything. That points clearly to a political career," end quote. Shaw's politics aside, the quote describes our current Democrats. They're lying every chance they get about the transcript of Trump's conversion with the Ukraine President Zelensky when it was actually revealed. Oh, what a difference. Clearly, they never thought what Trump would release it, foiling Schiff's master plan to read his wholly fictional account to malign the president. Schiff thinks we're so dumb that we won't know that what he read was pure fakery. Another stratagem bungled. So desperate are the Democrats to stave off what is coming that they think that by dirtying up Trump, they can blunt the disastrous repercussions of the Horowitz and Dunham reports on top of what is already known about their entire venomous grand design. Theirs is a fool errand, my friend. Trump will not be removed from office, and he will win in 2020, in part with the help of the Democrat Party and their overt obsession with finishing off the Trump presidency. Impeachment? Bring it on. Trump can put the Dems on trial in the Senate. The entrenched elites of both parties and a large portion of the corrupt upper federal bureaucracy understand the moral threat that President Trump poses to them. This threat has been the driving force behind the contentious effort to destroy the Trump presidency since and before the president's inauguration. These forces have no doubt already figured out that they can't beat the president at the ballot box. Impeachment is their last desperate chance to rid themselves of the man who has so effectively exposed their self-enrichment and their multiple sellouts of the American people. And now they think they see their chance, based on a single telephone call in which America's president, reasonably and with more than good cause, suspecting criminal wrongdoing, may have sought the assistance of a foreign head of state in getting to the bottom of his amplified justified suspicions. They're counting on how widely and deeply loathed former Republican Mitt Romney to round up enough Republican turncoat Trump haters to reach 2/3 in the Senate, all without regard to the total absence of anything remotely approaching, quote, high crimes and misdemeanors. No occupant of the White House before the current one has ever faced even a fraction of the unrelenting, groundless accusations and the outright lies endured by President Trump since well before the first day of his presidency. Through it all, he's repelled the attacks while he produced concrete results for the American economy and American conservatism unseen since President Reagan. The constant, vile, often violent denunciation of America's president during the last nearly 3 years, all by the 2016 losers and their major media mouthpieces, is without any precedent in the nation's history. The impeachment proceedings President Trump now confronts for a single telephone call to a head of state raising issues entirely appropriate to the function of his office are merely another round in the Democrat media elite's contentious effort to reverse the outcome of the 2016 election. In short, having failed utterly with their Russian collusion fantasy, the president's enemies have moved to an entirely ordinary and appropriate telephone call. The president's defense in the Senate, accordingly, must engage spotlight, scrutiny, and expose the entire course of odious conduct by the president's corrupt attackers, all from their first spinning of the Russian collusion hoax through the latest chapter in their attempted coup. Everything will be relevant in the Senate trial, and everyone, no exceptions, should be subpoenaed and interrogated under oath. Let's get them all. Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, John Brennan, James Comey, Peter Strzok, and the entire gang that's behind the coup. This includes Strzok's girlfriend Lisa Page, Clapper, Brennan, Comey, and whatever deep state operatives lied to the FISA judge to enable a spying operation on the Trump campaign and transition team. A crime, folks, without precedent, and one which massively outweighs anything that could credibly be alleged against President Trump. Here's the most important benefit of this broad and aggressive approach to the president's defense. In confronting all those who have ceaselessly sought to reverse the 2016 election, President Trump needs a legal team, this time that'll have a critical tool thus far denied them, the power to subpoena any and all persons, including all those who are elbow deep in the Russian collusion hoax. Unlike during the feeble and tedious investigation conducted by the Washington's elite chosen operative Robert Mueller, every single such person will be sworn and aggressively publicly interrogated under penalty of perjury by formidable trial counsel. This, folks, is a necessity. What the anti-Democrat authors of this latest attempt failed to realize in their furor of blind hatred is that the Republican Senate majority will be in command of the scope and during the duration of the trial, and that the truth-revealing power of the subpoena, followed by public testimony under oath, is the surest route to exposing their lies and crimes. Now that America has seen the Russia collusion lie exposed as a fraud, after more than 2 years of contentious harassment of the constitutionality of our elected president, both Senate leadership and the American public will be sympathetic to the president's claimed entitlement to lay before the Senate and full electorate all the details of the groundless campaign. That campaign to drive him up from office. A campaign of which the telephone call is merely the latest episode. After Robert Mueller's 2.5-year Russian collusion goose egg, it would seem as an outrage to deny the president the right to tell the full story, the story of the lies behind this latest chapter in the Democrats' 3-year attempted coup. President Trump needs to promptly assemble a highly professional team of tough, seasoned lawyers who will all have to be well compensated for their huge professional and personal risk that they're going to be taking. You know, we have seen time and time again what the deep state tries to do to the president's prominent supporters. A defense fund for the president would be oversubscribed in 2 weeks, you know. The team needs to be put together quickly and to promptly announce to the world that the Senate trial, if there is one, will focus on and expose the entirety of the Democrat corruption federal bureaucracy's anti-constitutional efforts to bring this president down. Many who breathe deep sighs of relief when Robert Mueller throws in the towel are going to be sweating again. When McConnell announces the scope of the allowable defense and how long the process will go on as the Democrats' dirt emerges, maybe Pelosi may become concerned about how many of her party could be destroyed by the process. She may go so far as to think better of going forward. If fine, so fine. The Democrats, once again, as in the Russian hoax, will look like fools. If, on the other hand, which is more likely, she proceeds into the moving blades of this propeller, so much the better for our president. In their apparent decision to impeach President Trump, the Democrats have taken the final step in their cold civil war, the one that they've been waging for nearly 3 years against a constitutionally elected president and his 63 million voters. The president's response should be withering, broad, and uncompromising. It should be one that turns his attackers into the hunted, a fate that lies and crimes have more and more than they earned. In the end, President Trump will be seen for 3 years to have performed 2 almost impossible full-time jobs simultaneously and supremely well. Those, President of the United States and defender of the Constitution's electoral process against those bent on destroying him. And they have been there, and they have tried to destroy him. Along the same line, I want to just point this out. You know, they say if you can't beat him, then impeach him. Yeah, that's the Dems' game plan. In 13 months, voters will decide whether or not President Trump will be reelected. This is what we've been doing ever since President Washington won re-election back in 1792. This happens every 4 years, and Americans have done a pretty good job at it. Why are the Democrats so eager to impeach a man who will be up for re-election soon? Answer's twofold. First, they don't think that they're going to be able to beat him in the election. Second, they've exhausted all their other options. So, are they admitting that they can't beat him on issues? I think so. Take a look at this. Have they passed any bills to pay for repatriation to African Americans or offer free medical care to illegal aliens? Did they pass a ban on assault weapons or move to confiscate AR-15s? Have you seen a bill extending Medicare for all? What happened to the wealth tax or raising income tax rates? Have they abolished student debt yet? Is anyone getting free college? Have they done anything about the dreamers or the millions here illegally? In other words, Democrat majorities can't pass any of those ideas that we keep hearing about in their presidential speeches. So why impeach? Here's why. It's the political Hail Mary of 2019 and 2020. Gives you something to think about, doesn't it, folks? And did you hear what Lindsey Graham said? He said this whole thing to him seems to be like a political setup. That's right, last week, a week ago, rebuking the Democrats' latest impeachment sham, Senate Judiciary Chairman Lindsey Graham said the pay-for-play accusations hurled at Donald Trump have a political smell and might be a political setup. Don't think that's possible, do you? Well, it seems like a political setup to Graham. He said this on CBS's Face the Nation a week ago. The whistleblower didn't hear the phone call. Senator Graham called for a John Hancock moment for House Democrats to quit hiding behind Speaker Nancy Pelosi and her call for an impeachment inquiry without a vote. That would be a first in U.S. history. Salem witch trials have more due process than this, Graham told his host, Margaret Brennan. This, to me, is not a quid pro quo, and the entire whistleblower complaint is based on hearsay, and we're not going to impeach a president based on hearsay as long as I'm around. This is a sham. There's a political smell to this. It is far different than Mueller. A quote from Senator Graham. He pointed to former special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation failing to impeach Trump as a nexus for the next latest sham. I think Mueller did a good job for the country, and there was nothing there, Graham added. I think this whole thing's a sham. I can't believe we're talking about impeaching the president based on an accusation, based on hearsay. Who is this whistleblower? What bias do they have? Why did they pick this whistleblower to tell a hearsay story? The transcript does not match the complaint. What's going on here? Why did they change the rules without a whistleblower? You can use hearsay, and then just last week they changed the basis for the complaint. I think this thing stinks, Graham said. He added that this is a political persecution of a president whose form in politics the Democrats disagree with. Pretty good, Lindsey. Pretty good job. Let me tell you how Trump wins. The Democrats cannot allow a Trump victory, no matter what. They know they won't beat him in 2020 because there isn't a serious and sane candidate among their party to oppose him. His victory means a firmly right-leaning Supreme Court for decades to come. Likely he'll get two or three more appointments in his next term. Roe versus Wade could well be overturned, and the last of anything and everything Obama, except his horrible legacy, will cease to exist. But before we get there, we have to endure this impeachment show. The Democrats have disgraced themselves through their antics since before Trump took office. They've proven they hate America, and Americans themselves are only a means to an end for them. They play for the ignorant and uninformed, the dependent and the needy, the inner city poor, the left coast loonies, and the New England trust fund fortunes. They made every effort to resist, delay, halt, or otherwise dilute the impact of Trump's policies and decisions, despite every measurable metric of national health trending toward greater health and prosperity. It's been a clown show after clown show, with Trump as the ringmaster of the circus. Trump has come out on top more times than not because he simply played them all. Knowing what their hatred for him would lead them to do, and their history as nonstop partisans, he set the stage. He set it with raw meat. Then he stepped aside, armed only with his Twitter, and watched the crazed bloodlust of the animals take them to new extremes. This all-time master of reality TV is still running the show. He's controlling the narrative, and he's driving the headlines. By the time they realize what Trump sets in motion for them to do to themselves, it's too late for them to recover. Their motives of intent have been laid bare by their own doing time and time again. They crawl away in shame, hating Trump more and more, and determined to get their revenge, no matter what. That's where we are now, a no matter what. The latest story is less logical than the last. It assumes that Trump went after Biden because he knew Biden would be his opponent, that Biden was, by definition, his only political rival. That couldn't possibly be true. No one could predict this early who was going to win among the 20-plus Democrat hopefuls, even with Biden so far ahead in the lead. Remember who was supposed to win the general election in 2016? Also, notice the timing of this. This came out just as Biden began to fall in the polls and Warren started picking up steam. Biden is malleable, morally questionable, with a weak, vulnerable, and problematic family. The Democrats can handle him. He'll do as he's told, if he can, just to get across the finish line. That began to look less and less likely over recent weeks, with more of his signature gaffes not missed by the populace or the mainstream media, and thus we've got Warren's rise. She's another story on the opposite spectrum of team playing is Biden. She's far more ruthless, very successful, and accomplished liar. On top of that, she really is crazy. She's really close to the Bernie-style crazy, you know, and there's no controlling her. She could take the party far left out into that la-la land where they would never be heard from again. So it's time to play another card, only this one wasn't quite ready. It wasn't supposed to be necessary because the Mueller card was supposed to finish Trump off. But this one was put together hastily after Mueller's testimony to Congress failed so miserably. Some of the bit players had their parts and knew their lines, but not all of them. That's why the initial news differed so much from reality. When the pseudo-transcript of the call was released, everything hadn't been fully synchronized. It was clear the stars of the show, Pelosi, Nadler, and Schiff, they hadn't seen the transcript yet, but were very familiar with the complaint. They had to make up stuff off the cuff, and it just didn't dive with the facts. It was all different. But lack of facts never stopped a Democrat, so they pressed onward, making sure they built some time in to clean things up. The 2-week recess, while they say they're still working, is when they're trying to close up their exposed rears. This one is going to hurt. Not because there is any merit to their claims, there certainly isn't, but because it sounds so familiar, like a record with a scratch on Biden's record player. It'll also hurt because it's painful to hear blatantly false. No one is that stupid. How can you be so crass? Allegations against a man who clearly loves his country and is doing his best to be a great president. It's going to hurt because these liars and contrivers represent our American. They took an oath to support and defend the Constitution, yet they only try to destroy it and those who revere it. The pain will be bad, folks, but it will go away, and another pain will set in. There'll be some mixed emotions, but there'll be no mistaking the mess of things the Obama administration and the deep state bureaucrats made of our government, our culture, our nation, and our relationships around the world with the good guys and the bad. Many people are going to deserve punishment, but in all likelihood, only a few are going to get sacrificed as tokens to prove that justice prevails. We're going to know better, but be glad it's all over. Others will leave government service tarnished by association, and even more will decide more and forever to never work for the government because it's not worth it. In the end, as the fog and smoke clear, one man will be seen standing, dirty and bruised, but still working hard to keep his promise. Donald J. Trump, 45th President of the United States, will have beaten them all. Against all odds, he won the presidency, and despite all attempts to oust him, he will have kept it. Never mind the biased press corps, conspiracies, political dirty tricks, lies upon lies about him, and all the crimes committed to try to harm him. He will still be president, and he'll be standing tall. No, he won't be unscathed, and it will show. He will have been cheated out of his agenda, but his chances to make more sweeping improvements and advances for our nation and our people, his accomplishments will remain overwhelmed, will have overwhelmed and overshadowed the corruption which preceded him, that which remained around him taking office, the American-hating mainstream media, which will never apologize to the American people for having repeatedly gotten it all wrong. Trump's greatness will have been stolen, but not completely. His leadership style and policies will shape Republican governance, trade policies, and foreign policies for decades. His judicial appointments will stave off socialism and save the Union as certainly as did Abraham Lincoln. Donald Trump, on his last day in office, folks, will step into history among the greatest of our presidents as the man who kept his promise to clean up government. And because of him, my listeners, America will be great again. God bless until next week.